everybody, Last Outrider here with a long-awaited video. Today I'm going to be talking about Thousand Suns and Space Wolves and why Space Wolves are a traitor legion. Even worse, an unrepentant traitor legion. And the Thousand Suns are loyalists. This video comes courtesy to you from my playing Horus Heresy Legions, which is a app game for the phone, a collectible card game. They just released their latest booster editions called Prospero Burns, which, not surprisingly, contains Thousand Suns and Space Wolves, to which has led to some discussions about Thousand Suns and Space Wolves. And I found myself in an interesting discussion where I finally fully vocalized my thoughts that Space Wolves are a traitor legion. And Thousand Suns are a loyalist legion. Not only are the Thousand Suns a loyalist legion, but they were unquestionably the most powerful legion in 40K. And I'm going to briefly go through the facts about why this is true. First, I'm going to say Thousand Suns has always been my favorite legion, which I've never been able to play, because I don't think they've ever actually been, maybe I'm missing something in the new 30K rules, but I haven't really seen the rules for a Thousand Suns pre-Heresy Legion. Second, I don't like Space Wolves. I don't like Space Wolves for two reasons. One, I think that their background fluff is carelessly written and cartoonish, at least their novels are. B, when I first started fighting against them in 3rd edition, they are probably still cheesier than even the Eldar. I remember fighting against their Grey Hunters or Blood Claws or whatever, and them getting just insane amounts of attacks, and everybody having power weapons and all types of crazy cheese, which definitely did not add to me liking them. However, they were the cause of my most memorable 40K game, which I might talk about later. Back to the story. The Space Wolves are a traitor legion. Leman Russ, a traitor Primarch. First, whenever they were discussing in the Horus Heresy series, and other Primarchs and people were trying to guess who might have turned traitor, all of the discussions, the first guess of everybody, when they're trying to think who, a legion turned traitor, who could it be, who are loyalists, everybody first says, it must be the Space Wolves. It must be Leman Russ. If we had to pick one Primarch and one legion to turn traitor, it's the Space Wolves and Leman Russ. Almost every Primarch says that, of the loyalist Primarchs who are confused about who might have sided with Horus. It was always the Space Wolves that were their first guess. Which is interesting, that all of the other Primarchs looked at them as the ones most likely to turn against the Emperor. Now, next, did they turn against the Emperor? Yes, they did. Well, I'm going to put a little caveat on that. By the end of this video, you have a choice. Either the Space Wolves are a traitor legion, or they are the dumbest legion. You can choose. Let's look at what happened with the burning of Prospero. And another caveat about this is I'm not sure if they were turned into a traitor legion on purpose, or if it was simply a plot hole by the GW creatives, and they simply have not addressed the issue yet. because there's no smooth way of explaining Prospero Burns. Maybe it was a Dan Abnett project, and after he wrote it, you know, you can't really retcon this because it's a New York Times bestseller, so they're not going to come back and retcon that. But here, I'm just going to, again, lay out the facts. I'm not going to create my own fluff here and then wrap my opinion around it. Magnus broke into the Imperial Dungeon. The Emperor and the Sigilette specifically ordered the Space Wolves to bring Magnus's body back, essentially, because Magnus is already on Terra. He's already talking to the Emperor. So really bringing his body back, I guess, is just kind of the Sigilette's order to make him look accountable as a superficial act of punishment. Because as I said, Magnus is already there. They've already been talking to him. So there's really no practical purpose for bringing back Magnus's material, physical self, except as a show to all the other non-psychers that he's going to be held accountable for using psychic powers. The whole thing was just supposed to be a show of force, and possibly some public censure. This is what was ordered by the Sigilette. This is said multiple times through the books. The Space Wolves were ordered to go and arrest Magnus and bring him back to Terra to face repercussions for his actions. This is why the Custodes were sent, because they didn't send the Space Wolves to arrest Magnus. They sent Constantine Baldor and the Sisters of Silence to bring Magnus back. They just needed the Space Wolves as backup in case the Thousand Sons decided to resist. Now we know that Magnus had no intention of resisting. He realized he screwed up. He refused to fight because he screwed up, and he accepts the magnitude of his mistake and was fully expecting to accept any punishment that the Emperor was going to put on them. So he had no intention of resisting. So where did the decision to burn Prospero come from? It came from Lehman Russ. Lehman Russ deliberately chose to disobey the Sigilettes and the Emperor's order to bring Magnus back, which he would have gone peacefully, and instead destroyed Prospero. That's a treasonous act. That's a treasonous act made compounded by the fact that the Thousand Sons would probably have been, in all of the time from the heresy to now, been the greatest weapon against chaos that the Imperium had. And Prospero was probably the greatest repository of knowledge in the Imperium. The destruction of Prospero and the Thousand Sons is probably worse than the massacres at Istvan. Because you figure, first, you're losing Sisters of Silence, you're losing Custodes, you're losing Space Wolves, and you're losing Thousand Sons. and you're losing a Primarch. So all of these were apparently loyalist forces that are killing each other, which could have been used in the defense of Terra, which could have been used in the defense of the Imperium in the 10,000 years since then. But instead, Leman Russ disobeyed the Sigilate and destroyed Prospero and thought he killed Magnus. And to compound it even more, they spent the next thousands of years hunting down Magnus as a personal endeavor. Again, never having been ordered to do this by the Emperor or Sigilate. Of course, now you can ask, well, why didn't they punish Leman Russ after this? Well, why would they? You already have a traitor situation, and everybody expects the Space Wolves as being the first legion to turn traitor in the first place, so you're not going to push them over the edge and give them actual excuse to do it, are you? You really want to add the Space Wolves to Horus as well after doing this? They already lost 1,000 suns, so now we're just going to throw the Space Wolves in it with Leman Russ too? Then the whole Horus heresy is just done. Freaking forget it. So of course they couldn't punish him publicly. Of course if they couldn't punish Leman Russ by saying he disobeyed the Emperor, then they had to say he's following orders. Oh, that was the order. Yes, didn't you know that? We meant for that to happen. We meant for him to kill Magnus and destroy Prospero. That's what they told the Khan. It was the Khan who first came out of the blue to find out about the destruction of Prospero, and he wouldn't believe it. He could not believe that the Emperor and the Sigilate would actually order Prospero, what is described as one of the jewels of the Imperium, to be destroyed by the Space Wolves, and for Magnus to be executed by Leman Russ. He couldn't believe it. He had to go there personally and see that it was true, because it is such an unimaginable order. And the Sigilate says multiple times in multiple books, I never gave this order. So exactly how did this happen? Leman Russ did it by himself, and the Space Marines, the Space Wolves accepted that order. Why? Why did they do this? What was the motivation? Because the Space Wolves always hated the 1,000 Suns. Why did the Space Wolves hate the 1,000 Suns? It was never directly said, but it was hinted at multiple times, because the 1,000 Suns are everything the Space Wolves are not. Okay, remember, the Space Wolves, and to a lesser extent the White Scars, are looked at as these barbarians, these primitives, these savages, these ignorant, animalistic butchers. And what is the 1,000 Suns and Magnus perceived as? The intellectuals, the educated, the civilized, the elite, the erudite of the Imperium. They were the best, most educated, and their planet was, I think it was, you might correct me on this, but if not, it's close, was actually categorized as a pleasure planet. How many Space Marine chapters are situated on a pleasure planet? But Prospero most definitely was heralded as one of the most ideal, pristine, utopian places in the Imperium. And it was run by the 1,000 Suns and Magnus. You think Guilliman was a statesman? Yeah, he was a politician, but was he really that good at it? You look at the 500 worlds of Ultramar, they were still utilitarian. They were still basically feudal fiefdom systems with a hard life, which they were proud of. Nobody would call them a utopian society, and that was the best Gilliman can do. But Magnus and the Thousand Sons ran Prospero, and it was considered the height of imperial civilization. At the very least, equaling and probably in many ways excelling past Terra. This is why Leman Russ hated Magnus. This is why the Space Wolves hated the Thousand Sons. Because they were perceived as everything good, while the Space Wolves were perceived as everything bad about an Astartes. Their planet, Fenris, is a shithole, while Prosperous is a pleasure planet. Their Primarch is called the Barbarian King, whereas Magnus is looked at as the smartest of all the Primarchs, and secretly the favorite creation of the Emperor after the Custodes. They're the only chapter, Legion, which successfully had a life out of being a legionnaire, out of being a butcher. Of course they had a life out, and they actually had to convince themselves that they were warriors too, by reminding themselves, we are legionnaires first and librarius second. That was Anzac Ahriman's lesson that he had to keep drilling into his lieutenants. Don't devote yourself to scholarly study only. We have to remember we're still legionnaires. But when the Great Crusade ended, the Thousand Sons could easily have devoted the rest of their life to science and research and art and statesmanship without ever missing the violence of warfare. They are the only legion that can claim this. Even the Ultramarines, they have to struggle to achieve that goal set by Gilliman. But for the Thousand Sons, it came naturally. They were the most powerful legion and the least warlike. And the most, they beat the Salamanders in terms of being humanitarian. They beat the Ultramarines in terms of statesmanship. They beat the Emperor's children, and obviously the Blood Angels in terms of culture. So of course the Space Wolves had to hate them because they were everything they weren't. And when they found the excuse, Leman Russ found the excuse, a slight little excuse, and said, haha, I'm going to take this order of arrest Magnus and turn it into destroy Prospero. And nobody questioned it. None of his officers questioned it. None of the companies questioned it. They just laid into Prospero like this was the thing they enjoyed most, calling themselves, we are the executioner of the Emperor. Well, the Emperor didn't order this execution, so they're not executioners. They're just flat-out murderers of the Emperor then. That was a treasonous act in every way that matched Istvan that I can see. They arrived in orbit. They said we're coming from Magnus. Magnus sat in the pyramid saying, yeah, don't do anything. I'm going to go with them. And he was just still in shock about Terra, and he was just going to go with them. And then they just started bombarding and attacking. Tell me, how is that any different? than what Horus did? How is that any less an act of treason? It made worse by the fact that they are unrepentant by it, that they believe they got away with it, that they, and even now, for 10,000 years, over and over and over again, they refuse to listen to the Inquisition. They refuse to listen to Adepta Terra. They just do whatever they want, whenever they want, claiming they will answer to nobody but the Emperor. They didn't stop there. The history of the Space Wolves' disobedience is long and obvious. They are an obvious traitor chapter which has cost the Imperium more than any good they've ever done. Easily. The only thing that stopped them from appearing like any of the other traitor chapter legions is they didn't like chaos. That's it. That's it. If they actually sided with chaos, they would be no different than any traitor legion. That was the only distinguishing factor. It's a little long video. We're on 21 minutes or so long. So for this reason, you're either going to say that Leman Russ and his legion got the order to arrest Magnus and misunderstood it, making him the dumbest Primarch, or they all understood it perfectly and turned traitor. And that's why who knows how the Imperium would have turned out if the Thousand Sons were counted amongst the Loyalist legions. That whole rubric of Ahriman wouldn't have happened, right? The Primarch and the Emperor and probably other would have found some other way to deal with this flesh-change situation. Or Ahriman would have brought the rubric to Magnus, who could have perfected it so that it did work properly. Because obviously it did work, it worked too well. So he could, which means if Ahriman could have created it, then Magnus could have perfected it. And imagine what the 10,000 years would have been like with an entire legion of librarians. And the Library of Prospero surviving, fighting against chaos. It would have been a very different 10,000 years. So that's my tirade. It's a little long video, I know. But my take is the Space Wolves are a traitor chapter, unrepentant traitor chapter, hunting down the Thousand Sons because they're the only ones who know they are a traitor chapter, similarly to the way the Dark Angels hunt the Fallen. And those are my main reasons for not liking the Space Wolves. I hope you enjoyed this. Bye.